want to show you a little bit about entities, and we'll start actually working on the assignments that kind of go together. A couple other things I wanted to show you. Let me bring this up. I'll maximize that. One of the things I'm going to show you is in the blog. I have a thing on GitHub which could help if you need. So I'm just going to do. It's at Conger ITC. It's the one that's linked. Come on. It's the one that's linked in the syllabus. These are the things from last time. I went there directly. If you go to it through the syllabus, it won't show you other classes. But if you do a search in there for GitHub, there's a little search box in the corner. Slowly, slowly. It goes down here, and there's a. I did a kind of a blog of just using GitHub, and I went through 3 ways using the web page. And the pictures I know are small, but you can always click on the picture and get a bigger. You can get the full thing if you need to look at it more closely. So it goes through and using the web page. And then it goes through using the Windows client, which you can download if you want. Windows client is probably the easiest way if you're on Windows. There's a Mac client too. And then I talked about using the shell. And for all the screenshots there, these are basically the commands that you need. The shell is actually probably one of your better options, one of your it gets you there faster, and it doesn't give you that file limit that you get when you try to push it. Go ahead and log in now, and I'll get you. So I just wanted to show that this was there. It may even be linked in. If it's not, I will add the link to Canvas. So I have that long thing on using GitHub. Most of you did turn in the things on GitHub, and it looked good. I mean, it was easy to get to. Everything was fine. The one problem we're going to have, and why the command line might be good, is that the model view control has so many files. There are literally hundreds of files if you're going to upload the whole thing. And the command line, as I said, does that without a burp. So does the Windows client. The web page, you're going to have to drag in folder by folder, generally. Yeah. There is GitHub integration in Visual Studio. I haven't used it much. So I'd have to play with it before I could give you a. But there is GitHub integration in Visual Studio, and it might work. What?
You have to install an extension in the Visual Studio Marketplace, but it's free.
It's free? Okay. They used to have the extension in a version or so back, but it would only work for private and paid GitHub subscriptions. But if this one works, have you used it?
Yeah.
And it works okay? You have to make the repo first, and then and then upload it. Okay. I'll play with it, and maybe because that might be the best option of all. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I would. Yeah, that's actually a good question. I would put these all in the same repo, but with different commits. Does that make sense? So the different commits will tell me kind of which assignment it goes with. The advantage of doing that is that if I ever feel the need to run it, a lot of times I can just look at the code and say, yeah, you're doing it right. But if I have a question, then I can download the whole thing and then run it. Right? Whereas if you do it as separate things, it's going to be a real pain to put it back together. Does that make sense? So anyway, there's this GitHub. I will put this link in the Canvas. And then the other thing I want to do is we will need to download a couple of databases today and put them into SQL Server. We can do that through Visual Studio. So I will do it that way, even though it's probably just as easy or easier to do it through Management Studio. Are you getting in? It looks like you are. Okay. So next place I'm going to go here is just github.com spconger. That's my site because there is another Steve Conger. So spconger works. I missed. What did I do? I did spconger. Okay. All right. And what we need is under database schema. I'm just going to leave this here for a moment because I need to open Visual Studio. But the two that we need for this class are Community Assist 2017. I made some adjustments. Some of you have used Community Assist in other contexts. And this one, actually, this older one has more data, but this one has a better structure. And I want to use that one. And then the other one we're going to use is the Book Review DB. The Book Review is for the examples, and the Community Assist 2017 will be for the assignments. Does that make sense? So I'm going to bring up Visual Studio, and I have to go through and make sure I bring up the right Visual Studio. It's right up top. No. We're going to go through Visual Studio. Very easy. It shouldn't matter. Yeah, it shouldn't. Okay. You don't have to. This is we got these are fine. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. But so what I'm going to do, I'm curious how many days I've got. Yes, I got a critical notation. Yeah, 3 days for me. So I will get, I hope he shows up today, but if he doesn't, we need to get these licenses renewed. I don't know why he must have put the trial version in without bothering with the license. That scares me because this could be our last functional day if I can't get a license, but I will get a license somehow. Worst case scenario, I'll steal one. Yeah. So we have over here the Server Explorer. You guys did that with me, right? I might need to zoom in here. If you don't have the Server Explorer, you can always get it from View. So in the View menu, there's Server Explorer. I have it here, and I already made connections to a couple of databases. But if you haven't, you can just do data connections. So where was it? Where was it? Right. Yeah, I think she did. Yeah. And as I said, if you need help catching up because it's taking so long to set up, let me know. So anyway, anybody not have the? So if you don't have any data connections, you can right click. So I'll walk it through, but you can add connection. Now typically, so you might have to do a screen before this, and you want to say you want SQL Server. Not SQL Server file, but SQL Server. Are we SQL Express in this?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So dot / SQL Express. It's better to type it than to hit the little down button. It'll get there eventually, but it takes it like 30 seconds. Yeah. And then when you do that down here, it should list the databases that are in there. Now I've already got Book Review DB, but I may run it again.
Mine's stuck on loading database names.
Then it'll be localhost. So yeah, if you're running a full edition of SQL Server like on your own machine, it'll either be localhost, that's the most likely, or if you named it when you installed it, it'll be whatever that name is.
I have a.
Did you run? Are you running a full edition of SQL Right, so let's get that. Is that dialogue? Cancel out. That's yeah. So right click button. This one might be. It's different. Change that because it looks like this is right. Yeah, we want SQL Server. And now you can do that. I think that the problem is it was assuming Microsoft Access.
I
don't have any databases.
You should have like master.
So did you have connection? Yeah, but nothing, but I'm not getting the whole list like you've got.
Yeah, don't worry. Maybe it's this one. Master is okay. What?
I have a. It's not connecting. to
All right.
SQL.
Yeah, I did a
So
test
there's
connection, I'm not getting.
change that spot.
Dial it up.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. For right now, you should only have like that. What? Yeah, you have to be able to do it to master. Right. You can do it through SQL if you want, but I'm going to share to do it through. Yeah, that's fine. Master is fine. So, you don't want to file. You don't really have any databases. You need a connection. So fast is actually a database that fast is a database that keeps track of what databases are located.
Yeah. So you have a connection to show here.
Say it can't make a connection.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if this is
Check your
just-
check your slash.
Yeah, it's backslash.
Okay.
Oh, well, you know what? I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
what I did.
that was my problem.
So now you and I had an issue yesterday. So I was like, okay. Oh, no, I still did it again. Okay, God.
Alright, so. What we need to do is so sometimes SQL Express sends stuff off.
There we go. Okay, it's very important. Dot, backslash. That's your backslash dot. So you may not have that because it's on your computer. It may not be. Your computer is okay. You're on desktop. Got it.
So somewhere inside. So.
More remote than it looks.
Master. Master. So did you see? So we have we will get going here. This is actually
It's like mine, it's like mine.
well. First, let's click the rest.
Like I say, we're getting a power slice. Oh, okay. Do you mind if I drive for it? Can you go back to your, oh, you don't, oh, that's right. That's- Okay, but the thing is though, you're on, did you download the SQL stuff?
Ah, good.
Yeah, you need to see.
Most are here. Most are here.
Yeah, right here.
So we have a key. We're gonna have to go around and enter it into every person's visual studio.
What do you want us to have up so you can take these?
That's a good question.
Where's
the
let's
thing?
see. Right click on that. Do computer management.
There's people who are in here who actually did the job. Go to the
All right, and then let's do. I'm just thinking your SQL expression. Maybe they're. services and applications. SQL Server configuration.
Oh, it's gonna be running in the background.
Yes, it has to be running. Sometimes it stops. Yeah. You can say okay at that point. Yes. Once you have master, you can do okay. You're linked. Let's let the key go around, and then we'll do the rest. So we go to services. Yeah. And it isn't running. So right click on it. And start. Hopefully not. But sometimes I've noticed on laptops, occasionally the virtual machines, the SQL Server stops running as a service, and you have to restart. And I think it may be because it looks at resources. And if resources are at all tight, I think it shuts itself down. Okay, so now you should be able to. So just look and see if you've got any. You might actually have to. Well, no, you might actually have to close it and read it. Because it needs to refresh.
I wouldn't happen to know where that is off the top of the head.
What?
The application part. Under the help component.
Is it under help? So I'm going to choose mask. Oops, there's Community Assist 2017. So I've actually installed both of these, but I'm going to choose master. And I'm going to do OK. And I'll reinstall the two. But so is it under help with the key?
I'm not sure. I forget where it is.
Help.
Is it register?
Manage.
It's not registered product. Is it?
I don't think so.
Um,
Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to
would it be under?
help, send feedback, register
What
product?
about? That's what I was thinking. Is it under there? Yeah, change product key.
Yeah.
So everybody needs to get there.
Yeah, so everybody, why don't you go to help? If you're on your own machine, you don't have to. But in Visual Studio, go to help and register product. And just get that screen up, and then if you want, we can take a break while these keys get in, and then we'll do the part. I think everybody will be ready at that point.
I think it's called enter a license.
Yes. Yeah, the part Visual Studio is registered.
Hey, guys. Yeah. They did master. That's the one. No, I just added the community assist. Community assist.
Yeah. But we have to do it.
Yeah. But it's good. Get three.
Right, you might have to-
Community assist and
Might have to do it separately.
Metro Hall.
So, yeah, you got to connect it.
Yes.
Are you? So if you do, like, and, Once we get going, the other parts actually should go pretty quickly. Chaos is always, yeah,
Being able to take on the voice.
sure. It might be a little setup.
Oh, yeah. You have online recording.
I do, and then we haven't done a lot of work yet. It's mostly been setting
Okay,
up.
cool.
Yeah,
I'll get up.
still getting set up.
One thing I wanted to say, if it helps, Fridays there's supposed to be somebody here. I'll have to get the hours. Do you know what the hours are, any chance? Yeah. So there's no classes in here on Fridays, so the lab is available on Fridays. Are you gonna set it up on your computer?
No, I'm trying to do my job.
Okay.
Just get something done.
All right. Yeah, this chaos at the beginning. Once we get going, it'll be gone. But do you have another copy of the key? Because I could go around and enter some too.
That would have been smart too.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, that works too.
If you can.
You'll probably want that because I doubt you'll be able to read my handwriting.
All right. Don't they have classroom keys for these?
Yeah, but it's not pulling up for me because
Okay.
it's not. It's still showing Lisa as administrator. It's not showing me as administrator. So it's not letting me get to where I need to be.
And is Lisa here today?
She was here yesterday, and I let her know. So she's trying to get that fixed, so that I can have access to what I need. Because this is just the one for the classroom. This is the one for the desktop one. Do you even use the desktop one? Do you want me to stop installing that?
I haven't been using it because the database thing, we always have to, use the database.
Yeah.
You didn't do mine, right?
Not yet.
Should I not do it with the overhead on?
Turn the projector off. But I mean, they're seeing what we're doing anyway, so.
Yeah, yeah. I will come around. There'll be two of us going at least. If I can type this right. 4-4. I wish they didn't make these keys so horrible. Yay. All right. Who needs the key? Did you get the key?
I don't know, yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to move down this side of this. And then I'll move up this side, although this side has other issues. Well, so a lot of them didn't have the new VM on this fall. Yeah, but they've been downloading the tools. Yeah, I'm not sure it's a whole lot faster if you copy the virtual over. Yeah, I mean, it takes forever too. All right, what do I got? We'll have to set her in on this. Well, yeah, but oh, you're not. Yeah, our lab.
Yeah, we're still.
So one last thing, I think we're about ready to go. Except for the ones installing, I will do those when they're done, which hopefully won't be too long. Where's my mouse?
Did you say something about something I copied over? You know, just these two?
I think everybody on this side is set up now because they've been just installed the tools.
Okay.
Why do I
saw
have-
that there was one box over here too that I guess the script isn't in the system.
Oh, I have no mouse. There we go. All right, I just want to do something really quickly. Nothing ever goes quickly. All right, let's never mind. I will get you at it. It may be a little bit. Okay. I'm going to write down your name so I get it in there. I will, before the class is done, have you in so you can get in. We'll get the virtual machine started to copy over, and we should be okay. All right, so let's go through adding these. I'm going to go back in full. Hopefully my mouse will be there. Whoa. All right, so I'm going to close this. We've got the license. We were doing this. As I said, what you want to connect to is master. Is there anyone that didn't get connected? I know you guys haven't. All right, so on the master, I am going to do a, there's some other ways to connect. I know some of you use the servers and connect to SQL Server that way. That's actually okay too. I'm going to right click. And get a new query. Slowly. Very slowly. Okay, that's not a good sign that it's taking so long. Okay, there's our new query. So back at GitHub, I'm going to take the book review SQL and just click it. You get this view that has everything pretty. It has color-coded things, but what you want to do before you copy it is turn it to raw. When you have the raw, it basically just gives you the text for the SQL code. I'm going to copy it. So I did Control-A for select, Control-C. Going to go back to Visual Studio, and I'm just going to paste. Control-V. Paste already. There we go. And then I'm just going to run it. Okay. When you run it, hopefully at the end there will be some. Okay, so there are a few errors at the beginning. They're not important errors. The errors are because I left in the logins, and the logins don't exist on the server. So, but the fact that you get these one row affected, all of that, that means that it worked. Once you've run that script, you basically can discard it if you want. The way I'm hooked up here, you don't see the connection. As I said, if there is a way to connect to the server itself, but I'll just do another data connection. I'm going to add a connection. Dot backslash SQL Express. And once we've done this, we're pretty well, except I have to spell express right. We're pretty well done with the setting up the databases. Okay, so down here, community assist and book review is there. So I'm going to do OK, and then I'll have a link to book review, and it'll show me all the tables and etc. All right, so this link over here, by the way, doesn't link any project to the database. It just links Visual Studio to the database so you can look at it. Part of what we're going to do in the next hour is I'm going to show you how to run the wizards to link things up. So I'm going to do the same thing that I just did. I'm just going to close this query window. I'm not going to save it. And I'll do from master again. I'll right click and do a new query. And I'll go get community assist again from GitHub, SP Conger. And anyone that can't set up right now, I will get you there. I'm going to go to database schema. And we want these community assist 2017, which is a little bit different than the one I use in the other classes. Again, you want to go to raw. Want to select everything. And go to Visual Studio and paste it. Make sure that I'm in the right. I'm pretty sure that's correct. So I'm going to run that. Even though it's already there, you can run it again. What happens if you run it when the database already exists is it just replaces it. The very first lines in this script are, if the database exists, delete it. And then it recreates it and runs it. So if you ever totally screw it up, you can recreate the database. It is possible to totally screw it up. There are some things you can do that will totally hose it. But so we have the databases there. All right. And then I'm going to close that again. Again, you don't have to save the script if you don't want to. And the Server Explorer is there mostly just for when you want to look at things to see, what you're dealing with. So like under Community Assist, and again, so under the Community Assist 2017, you can look and you can see what the tables are. And under any particular table, you can look and you can see what the fields are. That can be really useful when you're trying to set things up. It's just good for looking. Okay, are we ready for the project part? So I'm going to unpin this just so it goes off screen a bit. I'm going to do a file, new project, just like we did before. My video has been running this whole time. So if you watch the video, just remember the first hour is trash. Yeah. So I'm going to do a web application, and I'm going to call this, what do I want to name it? Because I'm going to use the book review for examples. So I'm going to do book review, I guess I'll just call it NB model view control. My hesitation on this, I'm going to add 2018. The reason is I think I might have that up there already.
Sorry, I'm just getting caught up with the database.
What?
Are we entering the project now?
Yeah, I'm starting a project. If you've added the databases, right? The databases have to be there for the rest of the project to work. Yeah. If you want to look at it, right? It has no material effect on the project, but it allows you to see the database if you want to, which can be really useful, actually. So I'm going to name mine Book Review MVC 2018, just because I think there is a book review MVC already on GitHub. I'm going to do okay. You guys with me? Everything all right so far? And we want it to be NVC. So NVC, no authentication. We're going to do our own authentication eventually. I'm not going to do Docker for now. If you at home or if you're on your own machine, you might have some options here for putting it on Azure, but we don't need to. Yeah, go ahead and. Oh, you're right with me. That's good, actually. It's a good sign. So I'm going to do okay on this one, actually. So before we're done, I want to get you 2 keys. I want to get you logged in. So hopefully that won't take too long. Anyone having issues with this so far? I don't know why everything is so slow today. It's probably downloading updates in the background and it'll. Eventually, there it goes. So if I go over here and if I look at, actually I want the Solution Explorer, there it is. We talked about this a little bit, right? So we have, when it says connected services, they're actually referring to like web services. You can bring those in. We could maybe talk about that. There's a whole bunch of references, which I'm not going to leave open because there's just too many of them. They're basically the libraries that are included in this. App data, we're pretty much going to ignore. You can put a data file in there, a SQL Server data file, but we're going to actually use a database on the server. There's some, the start has the config files. Generally, we're not going to mess with them, but there are some times you have to go in and mess with the config a little bit. Content is actually the CSS. I'm not sure why content is the name of the folder with the CSS files. As I've said before, you get Bootstrap for free, want it or not. You can, if you start with an empty one, you won't get the Bootstrap. But we do want, I mean, I think it's helpful at the beginning. We get one controller, which is the home controller, which basically says, welcome to ASP.NET MVC. I'm not going to worry about the fonts. You do get some fonts. I think you can download fonts. I do not know a lot about doing that. Design isn't my forte. My stuff works, but it's never that good. Do you have an empty models? That's where we're going next. For scripts, just as a reminder, you get Bootstrap and jQuery in the main template. Microsoft, for a long time, it used to do its own things for like validation and other things, but it eventually just gave up and used jQuery. They just dropped a lot of their validation tools and just used jQuery for it because it was easier and it was more platform, more common. Views, you only have the home view and then the shared view, and the shared view is where you can change the main pages, particularly in the layout. And we'll do that, but mostly I'm just reviewing because it's been a week or two, right? All right. So what we want to do is a model first. And what I'm going to do is I am going to right click on models and I'm going to add, and I don't see it there, so we're going to have to do new item. So the thing that we want to add in the new item is we want to click on data. We're in the models. Model, remember, is the part that handles all the data. So we're going to click on data. And what we want to add is what's at the very top, an ADO.NET entity data model. Okay. You need me to go through there to get there again?
Yeah, I got a little sidetracked now.
Okay. So I'll kill this. Let's go back. Right click on models.
I don't have that.
Oh, so you need the Solution Explorer. So it should be there.
There we go.
Yeah.
Model.
Right click on it, add. And then you want to do new item. In the new item thing, you want to click on data because we want to do the ADO.NET entity data model.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, why would you not be choosing the SQL Server database?
That well, so what the entity model does, that would actually just give us a database. I mean, it would literally give us a database file.
Oh,
So what this does is it gives us, it's going to write a class for every table in the database that we want to include. I'm going to show you that. It'll create basically a layer of C# code that talks to the database, which you could do by hand. So I have never found that it matters what you name this. You could leave it Model 1, or you could leave it, since we're dealing with book review, I'll call it Book Review Model 1. Okay. So I am going to add this, and it's going to start a wizard. And there's really no way to do it without a wizard. Now, you could write all of these classes by hand, right? You don't have to use, you can have the same effect by writing the data layer by hand. It's a lot of work, but you would have total control over it, right? In this way, there are things that are going to happen that are a little bit mysterious and a little confusing, and I want to explain them as much as I can.
even if you wanted to customize this, maybe you should keep this first.
Well, so yes, you can do it. I do customize. We are going to customize it a little as we go on. It's nice to have it auto-generated, and it's not horrible code, but there are still some magic parts that, you know, some people are bothered by things that are happening where you don't know why or where. We're going to do the first one, which is an entity designer from database. You can do an empty one. Now, the empty one allows you to actually create your classes by hand one at a time, but it still gives you the template for it. Empty code first, you actually design the database in C#. And then when you execute, it creates the database, which is kind of neat, but it's not the way I want to go at it. And actually, from what I've read about it, that's a very kind of a limited, if your data is fairly limited, right? You don't want to do that if you have any kind of complexities in your database. And then there's code first, where you have a database, but you're writing the code yourself, basically. There are lots of these templates. But we're going to do designer from database, and that's what we'll do all quarter, actually, because we do have the database. I'm going to do next, and so it asks what we want to connect to. Do you guys have a connection?
Mm-hmm.
You have the same one up there? No? If you don't have a connection, because you haven't downloaded the databases yet, so you're going to actually probably not be able to follow this through until you have the database. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you don't have a connection, you can do new connection, and doesn't that look familiar? It's the same dialog box for making the connection. You know, and you could, the server name would be, I'm going to actually cancel this after I do it, but and then you could go down here and you could choose your database. If you don't have the database that you want, you'll need to do this. Right now we have book review, but if you wanted to do community assist or something else, you might have to come and set the new connection. I'm going to cancel this because this is actually okay. This is the connection string. It's a little bit complicated. It's more complicated than you probably have to write by hand, but it's what this string is what connects the application to the database. It's not that different than if you're doing Java or C or PHP or something. It's just that the connection string is probably simpler. There's a lot of pieces to this connection string that you don't necessarily need.
So that string is in.
It's going to be saved in the web config. That's the safest place to put it, so it's not going to be in the code. There are in C#, there are tools that let you see the code in its byte form before it's fully compiled. If the string were in that, it is possible that if somebody had the tools, they could find it. In the config, it's on the server. It shouldn't be discoverable. Does that make sense? The web config is an XML file.
Is that a C# command or
What, the web config?
this connection string?
It is literally a string. C# won't.
Send to this.
Yeah, C# will not debug it. It will debug the failures if it doesn't connect, but it won't debug the string. It's like a SQL string you can't debug until you run it against the server. But it's generating it, so generally they work, right? Anyway, I would always save it in the config. If you want, I'll let you see. We're going to use the current entity. It lets you step back one if you want. And then if you want to use other versions, earlier versions, you can. And again, why you would step back to an earlier version is if the place you're working for hasn't updated things in a while. So I am going to do next. This is the part. All right, so notice it has tables, stored reviews, or stored procedures, and functions. This is what do you want to include in this. So I'm going to open up the DBO. And basically, I'm going to choose all of those tables. We want all of these tables included. I also want, and this will be important when we do the logins and registrations, I want the stored, at least a couple of these stored procedures. I want the new reviewer and I want the reviewer login. What it does with a stored procedure is it basically creates a function for them in a class. And it has the same parameters as the underlying stored procedure. Have you guys ever worked with stored procedures? They're just, yeah, they're SQL code that executes a whole bunch of SQL in a batch, and they can take parameters, kind of like a method, right? Can take arguments. So these two are the ones we need. These are contained in these. So when you use this to register a new reviewer, it gives them a hashed password. It takes their password and hashes it. The login is necessary then because you have to hash their password again and compare the hashes to see if they match. So rather than write a whole bunch of code to have that happen, I have stored procedures that do it. And it also is better to do them in a stored procedure on the database because it's consistent. When you do it through code, like through the C# code, if the string length varies at all, the hash is different, right? So it's hard to get a consistent hash. Whereas if you do it at the database level, they are consistent. So I'm going to do finish. And it's going to give me a diagram. It's also going to probably give me several, they aren't up yet, there they are, several warnings. Now you can turn those warnings off, but I don't. Those warnings are my security blanket that everything is going okay. This sometimes fails, and one of the signs that it's failing is you don't get the security warnings. And you might get 2 or 3 of them, which is a bit annoying. So if you do want to turn it off, you can. But as I said, they're my security blanket. You did the database, though, right?
Yeah, I need the master database.
Well, actually, you need the community
Book review. I need, I understand changes those.
Do you have book review?
I don't know if I saved it as such, but I printed it.
So it should still be there. So it looks like your word.
I should probably save it as book review.
Yeah, you want to do a new connection and you want to connect to book review.
Like, get like some type of firewall message.
Yeah, don't worry about the firewall
Just
message.
click allow access.
Yeah. So you might get a firewall message too. So I've had 3 security warnings. So it's telling you that because you're talking to a database that there is some danger. I'm looking for the security warning, but I'm not seeing it. I'm really zoomed, but you can see that it has the tables and it has the relationships. It knows the relationships. You might also notice if you've done database.
You've got another link here. Can we get any framework?
Go down to the store procedures. And just the last 2. Yeah. I have no idea why it's So I wanted to show you a couple of things about this real quickly. Notice that these are many-to-many relationships. All right, if you know relational database, you know what the linking tables are gone because the way it handles a linking table in code is it creates a list. Notice that this relates to reviews, authors, and categories. There is a collection of reviews related to each book. There is a collection of authors related to each book. And there's a collection of categories. In relational database, you can't have arrays inside of a data table, but these are C# classes, so you can have an arrays, and that's how it handles the relationships. So there is a collection of all the reviews that go with any particular book. You know, there's a collection of all the authors that belong to any particular book. There's a collection. And the nice thing about that is that it can resolve relationships for you. When you're doing, we're going to do a language called LINQ, which is kind of like a upside down SQL. But it knows the relationships. You can just do dot and get the relationship. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Send error message about it.
We'll look at it in a moment. The other thing I would suggest is restarting Visual Studio. Sometimes if a library isn't there, it'll be there when you restart. And I don't know why. These are all the same machines. The same virtual machines, everything. It should work. The other thing that I would do right now, although it doesn't matter a whole lot for what we're going to do, is I would build the solution. When we go on and you want to code after you've added this, if you don't build it, when you try to create your controller, it'll complain. Right? It has to be built before you can access this.
So this is actually building this classes.
Yeah, so let's take a look at those classes. So we built this. This is the diagram. And actually, they were there before, but it needs this build. So under models, we've now got this stuff, right? If you expand the models, we got the book review model. There's several files up here, and then there are the CS files for each of the classes. So if I look at author, you know, author's really simple. It's just got a name. So it gives me public author. This dot books equals new hash set book. A hash set is basically a collection of books. So the it's referring to books, and it creates a list of books. Inside of here, we've got the author key, the author name, and the gift and set, and there's also a virtual collection for books. Basically, a field that's it's a field that's a hash set. That's a collection. A collection is basically just a fancy array.
Keyword virtual.
Virtual means it's abstract. Does that make sense?
I mean, I understand the concept, but what does that imply in terms of our?
It means you can't actually implement that. I mean, directly. It's basically, this is more the concrete set of it. And this is sort of the parent, the abstract parent of it. It's hard to explain. It's weird how they do this, but it's not hard. I mean, once you get the hang of the code, it's not too hard. Notice you have these things in square brackets. These are compiler directives.
That makes sense.
What? That makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, is there an analog in Java, say, for what that?
Well, virtual would be abstract. That's a good.
It's just like abstract.
Yeah, and then there are different collection objects in Java, although I haven't done a lot with them.
So you don't have to declare it a virtual class like you would an abstract class.
Well, in C#, virtual is an abstract class. It is. This is basically declaring an abstract class that implements iCollection of books. One of the things that it does, all right, so this author class here represents one author, one row in the database. So there is another class, which this is creating books, but there's another place where it creates authors, which creates a collection of authors. So it's a collection of author class things. Does that make sense? It doesn't take too long. The concept of these are pretty weird, but it doesn't take too long to get the hang of how they're working.
So another key question is what was the partial about?
Oh, partial class?
Yeah.
Okay, this is something that, as far as I know, only Microsoft does. There's another piece to this class somewhere else in a different physical file. All right, you can split classes into more than one physical file.
Why do they do that?
So that they don't have to show you everything all at once, I guess. Particularly since the other part of this class may not exist until it runs on the compiler.
Which file are you in right now?
This is book. See how it has all the fields for books. Then it has collections for reviews, authors, and categories. So for the most part, we can ignore these, though. I just want you to see what they look like. Right, so This is a review. It creates a virtual book class, a virtual reviewer. And the reason why these aren't collections here is that each review only has one reviewer and only one book, right? So they're not many-to-many relations, so you don't have to create a hash set for it. All of this, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on it, but for the most part, you can just ignore these things except as you use them, right? And it's just a dot notation when you do it. When you need a book, you just say book dot or book BK equals new book, right? And then you can add the fields and move on. These are used within it to basically just give you the relationships. As I said, you can kind of ignore these once they're there. I mean, the structure of them. Where you would need to know the structure is if you want to write your own versions of these with the relationships. We're going to add some classes to this because particularly in Community Assist, the person is broken out from the address is broken out from there's 3 tables. It's really inconvenient to have to do 3 tables that are only partial information. So you just create a class that contains all that information. And then when you pass it off, you write it to the 3 classes where it goes. So we'll make some of ours that are basically just to make things a little bit bigger bundles to make them more easier to manage. So there are other pieces here. I don't know if we want to look at all of these. There's all of this. And I will be honest, I have never worked my way all the way through this file. I think a lot of the insert, update, and delete logic is in this file. And it's the model TT. I have seen, though, sometimes when you download, if this file is there, it won't run. It'll hang up Visual Studio. I don't know if that's true in 2017. This is a file you could delete because it will regenerate it every time you compile. Same with the other TT one. Designer, I don't think there's anything in that. Just a comment. This is the actual diagram, but it's the diagram in XML form. So anyway, that's what it generates. Has anybody looked at the assignment? What is it that besides adding the entity model, did I have you do anything else? Oh, so we're going to add a controller and do it automatically, right? So it's the whole wizard thing. Okay. So let's do that. Let's go back. It's hard to navigate in Zoom. I should probably just change the view, the things. So I'm going to add a controller. All of these things can be closed if you want. You don't have to, but there are times when we're going to have a lot of things open in here. All right, that one didn't close. Oh, because it's over here. So I've closed all of those. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on controller. I'm going to, let me look at what table I want to do this with, though. Let's do it with category. It's a nondescript, useless little table. All right, so I'm going to right-click on controllers. I'm going to add, and what I want to add is a controller. We are mostly going to add empty controllers. So, but this time I'm going to add.
Before you do the controller, it says here to do the models and data entries
You need to compile them. Did you do that? We did the model in the data entities.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to do, is it the second one I want or the third one? Let's try the second one. If it fails, we'll do the third one. So I'm going to, well, actually, let's do the third one. I'm pretty sure it is the third one. I'm going to add that. So the model class is going to be category. So I went down into the model and I looked for category. And it's going to generate views. It's going to reference the script libraries, and it's going to use a layout page. And it's going to be called categories controller. The names of these matter. The controller and the view folder have to have the same name. So what we're going to do is we're going to let it automatically, and then I have to say which data context class, and that's review, book review database entities. We're going to let it generate everything, and then we'll take a look at that. This is the only time we'll do that. In general, we'll be doing these from scratch. But because again, it does things, but they're not necessarily what you want it to do. I'm going to add these. It'll take it a moment because it's going to add several views. It's going to add the controller. Actually, that's what I said. You want entity, book review, entity. Yeah.
Like error.
It's hard to build it. Did you build it?
Yeah, here, look.
I know, but build it. Go up to project, or yeah, build solution. Yeah. Then I have no time. And I reloaded it, it's going to create some pretty full components I created. Everything to everything Yeah. You have an extra, you have to do model folder is going to
It's like that other package.
Give me a moment, we'll walk through it. It won't take, I mean, it's taken forever to explain it, but it actually doesn't take too long to do this. Yeah. Sure. Why is it not? It's a similar problem maybe everywhere. Model, oh, your model is a video model. I don't think the model is a video model. Things seem to be moving around. See how your rigid models this is sort of not a key there. What I would do is see if you can copy all of those. I put them in the models folder, so I'm not going to just kind of, you might be able to do that. Well, why is your font still there? It should be just out on the- so it should be- Worst case scenario. You're gonna put sometimes if your entity thing is messed up, the easiest thing is to delete those files and run it again. Yeah, it's easier than trying to fix it. It can take hours to fix it. It can take seconds to rerun it. So this is the controller that it created. It created an index. It created details. It created a create, so you can make a new. It basically gave you the whole, and it gave you an edit. It basically gave you a whole CRUD. One of the reasons to run this wizard is just to look at the code, so you might give you some idea of what it's doing, right? When you look at this, you have an action delete. It takes in an integer. The question mark is basically it's treating it as a generic. It's an integer, but it's taking in the ID, whatever the ID is. If it's not, if it equals null, it just returns an error code. Otherwise, it does a search of categories to find that particular record with the ID, and then it returns that category in the view. Is that delete? So it deletes that, right? This one returns the view. That one returns the category. It just deletes it. It returns. So when we do the delete, well, the first thing it does when you do a delete is it returns it and asks you if you want it deleted. And then notice there's another confirm delete. And then it goes back to the main page. I could show you what it does. If we go to, I think if we run it from here, we can take a look at what it generated, and we can look at the code a little bit. But I think this was all I was going to have you do today, is run these wizards and look at them. It's a starting place, right? And then what we'll do is we'll build stuff. It's good to have these things as a reference. So I'm hoping that it goes to categories. It looks like it might just go to the actual home page, which is not what I want. Although we can fix that. Slowly, slowly. Again, it has to build it all the first time it runs. Yeah, so we went to the ASP thing. There's a couple things we could do. I'm going to do slash categories. I think it was category. Yes, it's an E, right? If that doesn't work, it was.
Categories brought up.
It's IE, yes.
Yeah.
If it can't be, there it goes. So here's what it gave us for an index page here. It lists all the categories, right? And again, this isn't necessarily what you want to do, but that's what it did. On each of these, it gave us The detail edit. So there's detail, edit detail. So when you do detail, it just says category name fiction, right? And then I can go back to list. If I want to edit it, it gives me text boxes for all, and if I had many fields, it would do many fields, right? And it will let me edit this, and I could save it, and then I can go back to list. I probably could have changed that. And then if I do delete, it'll give me this, and then this is the confirm, right? So the detail basically just gives you one record. I should have maybe done something other than category where it had multiple fields, because instead of laying it out as one thing here, it would have it like if I had category name, category description, it would just lay it out vertically in a form instead of as in a table. Yeah. It's like the edit, it's just giving you the information for that one row and putting it in a vertical form instead of putting it across like a row. Again, with this, it doesn't make any difference because I only had one field here. Back to list always takes you back to index. If you do create new, it allows you to create a new category name. Anybody have a new cat? I have no idea what categories I have in there. I don't think I have,
Historical romance.
we could do historical romance. I was thinking,
Erotica?
no, I don't have that. That would be one we could add.
Very similar.
Yeah,
That's true.
How about physics?
we could do physics too. You could add any you want. I was thinking steampunk. It's actually what I was thinking.
Sure.
Yeah, there's historical romance at the end. So it added it. And if you look, check the database, it's in the database too. Right? So the thing is, this is what the wizard does for you, is it gives you the complete CRUD. Create, read, edit, and delete. So it gives you the complete CRUD for that. The trouble is, that's not usually what you want to do with your data. I mean, it might be good if what you're doing is doing a content management kind of thing, but it's not necessarily what you want to do with the data on your database. And you have some problems like, that's a long list for a single page, although I'm zoomed, right? You might want to be able to break it up in different ways. It's just not necessarily but it's kind of neat. You get the whole CRUD for free, right, by just running the wizard. And I often do this when I'm doing a project just to show the code for it. So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to close this tab. I'm going to go back to let's zoom. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. I'm going to stop it, right, because it's still running even though I killed the page. And I want to look at the views. So notice that there's a view called categories, and there's a view called create, delete, details, edit, and index. So I created for every method in the controller, I created a view. So if I look at index, you look there and it gives you, tells you that the model is, why is it doing that? I don't know why it's right there. It goes. Took it a minute to recognize it. It gives you the model is category. It tells you the page is index. Puts the button, create new, create. Does the, gets the name from the model, and then it loops through. There's only one field, so we got our, actually didn't do it as there's the header. These are the data. And then within the table, it gives you the action links for edit, details, and delete. And then it ends the table, right? So it just does, we kind of did that on our first one, set it up like that. So if I go to do edit. Okay, so it gives you a little bit of a form. And again, these are nice to have an example of because when you're trying to type this in, it's a pain. I sometimes just cut and paste and change the names. But we've got a form, horizontal, which I believe is a bootstrap form class. There's a using HTML begin form. I don't know if you need the anti-forgery token. Yeah.
I've had an issue when I try. So when I try to do the controller, it wants me to open a file.
When you say add new controller.
Forget what it is. Continue. I'll come back to you.
All right. I think it might be still the problem that it doesn't you might want to rebuild the whole thing. Go to build in a build project. Because once you move the folder out, it may not have recognized the changes. So anyway, this sets up a form. And we'll do this a couple of times. There's also a little bit of, there's a reference that calls some jQuery scripts. Right, I think this is how it processes the button. So this little section scripts needs to be at the very end also. But I mean, basically, you can look and for every, for every one of these, there's, the code for it. And as I said, I do this basically just to get a sense of how these things look when you need to write them on your own. So I think the first assignment is just to run in Community Assistant. I haven't left you any time much. So I will see. I assume most of you can't do this at home. Some of you can. But I will probably give you time in class on Tuesday? No, Monday. Give you time on Monday to run this. And also, give me time to troubleshoot some of these other problems. So I will give you time on Monday. This won't take very long, though. It took forever to explain. It doesn't take very long to actually do it. So we'll try to troubleshoot some of the other problems and things too. Yeah. For the whole project or just for the assignment? So let me see. You have it up. You should run and make sure this works. Oh, so what I said for use the business rules table in the Community Assist to do the wizard. Again, it's sort of an irrelevant table, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's
just run the wizard like I did with the business rules table. So I think, as I said, it took forever to explain. It only takes a few minutes to run. So we'll see how Monday goes. The other thing is you probably would want to put this up onto GitHub, not my sample, but yours when you get it, and we'll start building things up there. That's the idea. We'll see how that works. You can download the Windows tool from GitHub, or you can do the command line, or you can copy the folders over.
So every time I try to do the controller, it wants me to open a file.
All right, so what I would do, there's probably just start over. Because I think literally it took us 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm debugging this. Yeah, that's okay.
You want me to?
Um,
Next project.
It's up to you. I mean, it's probably fine. If you don't want to put everything there, it's just if I ever want to. We'll see.
Like the first part of it or something, so like,
Well, you get to do it again with the.
okay, yeah, good. Yeah, so maybe.
But it works once you commit.
I guess we have other stuff. But yeah,
Oh, for tomorrow for the, we might have time. I'll just, tomorrow is the 20.
yes. What are your office hours?
My best office hours are on Tuesday and Thursday between like 1 and 8.
Okay. Cool. That's exactly what I'm for.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah. I'm so confused about Monday, Wednesday.
It's, this whole quarter's been a little confused. Yeah, we're a little bit, at this class has missed 2 Mondays because we started on a Tuesday.
We have one more Monday we're gonna miss as well. I think.
Yeah, I think there's another
There's one
holiday.
more holiday, yep.
It's like, it's kind of nice, but also.
Yeah, I know. Well, it would be nice if it didn't hit the same
Right,
class
I know.
every time.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to see if I can put this up on GitHub. So it's, oh, so that now it's just saying an update's available, which is good. So let me see if I can do, this will be a lot easier if I unzoom. You got it up there? Or you did something else? You got it to work?
I got it to make a diagram.
You just still doing the font folder? Your font folder is still in there? Right. You should right click on it. And then you can just go down to audio button instead. Label it. Oops.
It's okay, I got it.
Give it a second. Oh, yeah, I killed the video, yes. That is going to be one messed up video.
Okay, I think I just finished the homework.
So you finished the homework?
Yeah, and so it like took forever to go through in class.
Right, I mean,
Like,
literally, it should
just
take like
finished.
5 minutes to do.
Yeah.
Once you've set it up. But let me kill the video.
I had to add a git ignore
Oh, to
in,
do
in
it.
Visual Studio. Otherwise, it would not sync because of the block files created by Visual Studio.
Oh,
So I don't know if everybody's going to have to do that or not, but my mission.
I think you have to initialize it, right?
Yeah, once it was done, like I said, it still didn't want to push because of the
Oh,
lock
okay.
files in the VS folder or whatever.
If I close the Visual Studio, would that?
Nope.
Nope, okay.
Not if you're trying to push it through Visual Studio.
Oh, I wasn't going to. I was
Right.
going to just do the command line.
Yeah, in which case that'll work. Yeah.